Okay, this is the last part to the Korean War. Regarding the development, how did it impact the development of the Cold War? This is something that you need to continue to think about as well, because all these chapters that we are doing is all part of the Cold War. All right. Okay. So hang on, So if you take a look at these questions here, these are the collated mid-year exam questions. I haven't done the prelims one yet. I'll put it up. I'll put it up soon after I'm done with that. But if you take a look at the questions very quickly, okay, you can pause the video if you need to look at the questions. Okay, like the 12 mark ones, responsible for the Korean War, caused the outbreak of the Korean War. So that's the common issue that you see. Okay, why the USA was involved, why is it important? Next batch of questions. How the emergence of communist China superpowers made use of by the local Korean leaders. Explain why breakouts World War was justified. Led to tensions within Korea being part of the Cold War. Involvement in the Korean War is the most important factor. Okay, now if you take a look at all these questions, you realize that none of them, at least for the mid-year exams, none of the schools actually asked about the impact of the Korean War. Now, this doesn't mean that it won't come out and is not important, and especially more so that you need to actually look at it. I already mentioned in class, I'll say it again. I did try to set an SBQ on it. I so far have not seen any schools that said on the impact of the Korean War. I tried it and it's not exactly easy because of the lack of sources. But again, doesn't mean to say that it won't come out. So that's something that you need to prepare yourselves for. Okay, we'll be looking at these three main points. It'll be a quick lecture because this is quite a small section and easy to understand. Okay, expansion of the Cold War beyond Europe, intensified American involvement in the Asia Pacific, and escalation of military tensions between the Western and European bloc in Europe. So again, it will link back nicely to the Cold War and a lot of other things that will come into play regarding the Cold War. Now, first of all, I think this is easy enough to understand. The Korean War will be the first instance where they expanded beyond Europe. You would realize that most of the stuff that we talked about in chapter 1, right, it actually centers around all the European countries. The satellite states, when Stalin got hold of Romania, Czechoslovakia, Poland, all these are all European countries, by the way. Okay, the Marshall Plan was available to only European countries. It wasn't the entire world. So basically, for the Cold War, it was fought in mainly Europe at that point in time. So the Korean War marks the first time that actually the Cold War was fought outside Europe. Okay, the first point that I have here. And the superpowers became more involved in local conflicts. Okay, local conflicts meaning to say like Korea. That is an example of a local conflict. Another one that core history students you had studied or you will be studying about will be the Vietnam conflict. Now, these conflicts, they saw the Cold War manifesting in different parts of the world. Korea is the first place, and then after that, you have Vietnam. These are all in the syllabus, but of course, outside of it, there are many other countries who were embroiled in this entire thing as well. Okay, so at this point in time, it also highlights that the two superpowers, they did not have any direct confrontation with each other. This again is something that's very characteristic of the Cold War, where in the Korean War, sorry, especially because we ask the question of whether is it more of a proxy war or is it more of a civil war. Okay, so that is a good question to consider and ask. And also one of the SEQs that we can actually look at, was the Korean War more a proxy war or a civil war? Okay, then look at textbook page 64 to 65 for the list of the proxy wars that were being fought as part of the Cold War. All right. Okay, the second point is regarding the intensified American involvement in Asia Pacific. So it's linked to the first point. We see that the Cold War previously was focused in Europe, and now they actually expand to outside of Europe, and they became more involved in the Asia Pacific because this area is more dangerous. Okay, for the core history students, we studied about Malaya. There was the presence of communists. We studied about Vietnam. Again, it's fighting communists as well. So you see, under decolonization in the Asia Pacific area, we had a very real problem of dealing with the communists, Singapore included as well. And if you recall, I should have mentioned about Lee Kuan Yew being bribed before by the Americans to try to do something about the communists. So basically, for the Americans, they actually want to raise their involvement in this area. Okay, and we are looking at two principal points here. First is the economic reconstruction of Japan and the formation of SEATO. Okay, similar to NATO. Economic reconstruction of Japan, they were devastated after World War II, as will any country be, and they have a weak. With this weak Japanese economy is a chance for communists to come into power in Japan. Again, going back to Marshall Plan, if you remember Truman Doctrine, Marshall Plan. Truman Doctrine, they wanted to deal with Turkey because they wanted to prevent it from following the communists, and a way to do it is to increase their economic strength. So any weak economy would give the chance for the communists to take over, because remember, if there are poor people are going to support the government, which actually would help you to gain equality. So previously you would have nothing, and now with communists you actually have something. So with a weak economy, the communists have a chance of coming into power here. So therefore it's important to rebuild Japanese economy, and Japan was also to become an important and convenient base for them for military supplies to Korea. This is a very logistical problem. Let me show you the map. Okay, so this is the world map. US is here, and you can see the North Pacific Ocean right in the middle here. And then finally, you see Japan, Korea. Okay, Singapore is this dots where I currently am. Okay, so if USA were to actually establish a base in Japan, this would be a good place for them to actually launch any supplies and whatsoever help that they need to send to Korea, instead of traveling from here directly all the way here. It's going to be much faster if they station themselves in Japan. Okay. So this leads to a growth, and this led to a growth and expansion in the defense industry in Japan for USA, and boosted Japan's economy. For Japan themselves, after World War II, they adopted a pacifist attitude, in that they do not want to have a military. Even up to today, they don't really have a proper defense force. Their defense is entirely dependent on USA if anybody were to attack them. Okay, and also because of the USA being based, they're basing their military bases in Japan, it has also led to actually a growth of United States culture in Japan. Like for example, baseball. The only places that actually play baseball extensively is Japan and United States. The rest of the world is like, baseball? I hope you guys know what's baseball. Okay, so these are some of the examples of the bases. Misawa Air Base, Yokota Air Base. Okay, you don't need to know all these, but basically all through Japan, there were many bases for the United States. Alright, now, Southeast Asian Treaty Organization. You try to recall the NATO North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So this is set up by USA to include USA, Britain, France, New Zealand, Australia, Philippines, Thailand, blah, 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 and Pakistan. And it's supposed to prevent the spread of communism in Asia Pacific. Okay, so it's similar to NATO. If any of these countries in SEATO were to be attacked, the other countries will come to their aid. And the reason for setting this up is similar also to NATO. They didn't want the domino effect. Okay, if one country were to fall to communism, and if you look at the diagram being shown here, the first country that fell was China. So they were worried that the second country to fall was Korea and Vietnam, and actually, incidentally, these three countries are the ones that actually fell to communism. Laos and Cambodia actually also fell to communism as well, and the ones that are standing straight are the ones supposedly without any communist influence. Okay, so they were afraid of this domino effect that would happen in SEATO, so the setting up of this organization is supposed to prevent that. Now, the last point, okay, I'm on the last slide already. Told you this is a very fast part of the chapter. Escalation of military tensions between the Western and communist bloc in Europe. And because of this Korean War, it led to actually the NATO members arming themselves in preparation for Soviet-led communist aggression. Again, it is very similar to the themes that we keep seeing. Okay, Soviet Union is aggressive. Soviet Union wants to expand, whereas we understand that from Stalin's point of view, he wanted some things to be defensive. It's not necessarily all the time aggressive and spreading communism worldwide. But because of this particular incident in Korea, remember, the overarching thing that we are looking at here is about impact of Korean War to the rest of the world. So one of the problems that or rather one of the impact that the Korean War has created is to increase the tensions around the other European countries. And so military exercises were held to strengthen the armies of NATO, military expenditure increased and rearmed, and Soviet Union decided to form the Warsaw Pact in response. Now in Cold War, in the first chapter, I know we looked at this, and we looked at actually the formation of Warsaw Pact in response to NATO. But if you recall the dates, right, NATO was formed in 1949 after the Berlin blockade, and Warsaw Pact was formed in 1955. So actually it's more appropriate to say that Warsaw Pact was formed in response to the end of Korean War. Korean War, again, the dates are 1950 to 1953. Make sure that you remember all these general dates at least, okay? It will be very helpful for you. Alright, so that concludes actually the chapter on Korea. Okay, so this is still a possible SEQ question. I can ask you to explain what is the impact of the Korean War on the Cold War, and that will be a very easy question to address. And looking at my notes, I think I do have that particular section on it as well. Okay, and we shall move on to the Cuban Missile Crisis next.